Welcome to Cheaper Than Therapy, a podcast that journeys into conversations that demystify, destigmatize, and desensitize what goes on both inside the therapy room and in daily life.
I'm Vanessa Bennett.
And I'm Danae Logan.
And we are seekers, soul sisters, and holders of sacred space. Every week, we sit down for soul-provoking conversations with fellow seekers, thought leaders, change makers, and even real people during live coaching sessions as they navigate the hard work it takes to be a human.
This is Cheaper Than Therapy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Cheaper Than Therapy. So today we are talking to Liz, and Liz wrote us in about a topic that I know when Danae and I were reading it, we were both kind of like, oh, like my heart. It sounds like, Liz, you recently separated from your partner, your husband, and you share custody 50-50 of your 2-year-old, and you're really struggling with, I'm going to let you put words to this, but the way that it felt to me is really struggling with like the struggle around that, the sadness around that, the, as a mother, like that kind of, anxiety, struggle is the word that just keeps popping up for me when your kiddo has to go away and go to dad's, even though you have a really good relationship, it sounds like, with dad. Yeah. A little bit deeper into that, like the specific struggles.
Sure. I even just got like emotional listening to you talk about it. It's just pain, really, every time. And it makes it easier because we do drop-offs or exchanges, I guess, mostly through daycare, which is better. But I still end up in tears most of the time when I'm like, oh, I'm not going to see her now and we do every other day. So I'm not going to see her now for like 36 hours. But when it's really bad is when we do it like once a week during the weekend. And then when she's in tears, leaving me, and then I'm in tears and and as I said in my message to you guys, my therapist, who I've been working with for several years, has kind of helped me reframe it, that she's getting her needs met, and that it's really, if I reframe it and from her perspective, she's getting love from both parents, because how I was initially seeing it was that like it was a I've done a little bit of work with Jillian Turecki. I did her like heartbreak course. And she talks about blueprints. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But it's kind of like basically expectations. Like it's what I expected or what a mom looks like to me. And to me, a mom is always there, right? And I'm like, I'm only there half the time. So that getting over that, like kind of changing my blueprint of what a mom looks like, has been a really something I really had to do work on. I'm still not there, but something that I've identified to put words to, and I will say, we have a very good relationship. So like just on Saturday, she was technically with him and I like brought dinner over and we ate dinner together. So I was still able to see her.
So Liz, I'm just I'm going to put words to a few things that I know that but I just want to make the statements, right? So I want to speak first to what you said about the kind of blueprints or like the expectations of what a mom looks like. And I love that you have that cognitive frame in your mind of, I know this isn't realistic, right? Like moms are there all the time. We all know that that's not the truth, nor is it healthy, right? For the mom or the kid. At the end of the day, even if you're in the partnership still, like mom can't be there all the time, right? And I know we know this, but it doesn't feel like that's the truth. It sounds like in her head that it's the truth. We know that it feels different, and that's okay. I also want to put words to, this is grief work. Right. And the hard thing about grief work is that there's no linear path. There's no ending point. There's no checklist or light switch when like, okay, and now the grief work is done, right? Like I understand it conceptually, I've reframed it, and now I have moved past. Like that's just not how it works. And so I say that, I guess, all to say, like, this is going to be a squiggly line process for you. Some days will be better, some days will not. Your kiddos also too, which is such a hard age to be away from them, period. I mean, my kiddos too, I get that. And I guess I'm putting some of these statements kind of out there, I suppose, in the ether, just to like make sure that we're all on the same page with like all of these like truths, right? Like conflicting, opposing, whatever they might be, they're all just like truths that exist out there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I feel like I want to jump in with just a couple of, obviously what Vanessa said. I think there's no one who is a mama who can't just feel like the ping of pain in our hearts that we all feel as mamas, with the idea of like not having access to our kid at any moment when we need to feel the longing to, right? That's real. And as someone who also, is divorced and co-parents with a child, I will say that I think the gift of your situation is having this relationship with your daughter's father. I think that just puts you so many thousands of strides ahead of so many people who, have sort of like challenging, combative relationships with a co-parent. The fact that you guys are able to be in a pretty good place and hopefully able to cultivate a friendship is such an unbelievable gift, right? Now, what I will say about a 2-year-old, and Vanessa and I were just having this conversation, as much as it is going to be the tension of holding a few opposite truths at the same time, one that I'm going to miss her. There are going to be ways that this is just going to be challenging, that sometimes I'm not with her. One thing I will say that one of my girlfriends told me when my kiddo was young that was super helpful is children, especially at this age, have no concept of time. So for you, it's like, I'm away from her for 36 hours. Like, she's not like, how many more hours until mommy's back? That's your stuff, right? Like, that's like what we're doing, but they don't have an awareness of that. This is just like daddy time. Like, you could be gone for a week and it would be like, mom was gone for 5 minutes and here she is again, right? Like, she doesn't feel that the way that you feel that. So that's a little like, okay, well, that I feel like feels better to understand. But then also, you sort of touched on this a little bit in the blueprinting. And I think what was really helpful for me that my therapist helped me reframe was a little of what you're saying is that, this really gives her an opportunity to cultivate such a solid connection with her father, and that she has these two experiences of each parent. And how do I allow that to be something beautiful for her without energetically, and listen, this is the hard part, energetically putting on her what that feels like for me, meaning she is a little GPS system. She picks up everything you feel, Liz. Like, you don't have to say a word. You don't have to like even make a look. Like, she feels what her mama feels. So this is like the wholehearted embodiment of how do I drop into what is beautiful for her about getting to spend this time with her daddy, so that she doesn't have to feel like, ooh, something's wrong here.
I'm leaving. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Mommy's going to be sad. Like, energetically, she will feel it even if that is not what you're saying. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry. This is all just like really heavy, but
yes.
Really helpful.
I mean, Liz, it's fucking sad. Like, that's what I was saying about grief work, and the sense of like tending to yourself during this, and it sounds like you are, and I love that you have, your own therapist, and it's like a little bit of this is going to be just being with yourself and being compassionate and being tender and letting yourself cry and letting yourself feel all the feelings and, doing this thing that we do, which is like dance between the rational mind and like the thinking body.
Right.
And not trying to like rationalize your way out of feeling, and not allowing the feeling to also overcome the mind. Right. And it's a practice, and it's a dance, and it's messy.
Yeah. But I love all the things that you both said, and especially kind of me projecting how I feel about the situation onto her, and kind of letting it is beautiful that we can like all hang out together. I don't know what that would look like if one of us like found another partner. And that's kind of my like sticking point for me moving on is her. I can't I know I sound like super emotional right now, just because I've been really looking forward to talking to you guys just as both moms, because my therapist is a man and he's wonderful. He's very good at what he does. But you guys have obviously
it's different.
You're both females, you're both moms, and you have a more like spiritual, soulful feel, which I need. And I'm looking for and probably need to kind of like maybe add to my coach therapy life. But yeah, I mean, I know, everybody tells me this and I'm tired of hearing it, but like they're like, it's still early, like you don't need to move on, blah blah blah, you don't need to date, I'm like, yeah, but and
like who's telling you that?
Yeah, a lot of people. But I don't know what that's honestly like when I try to like look forward to that, I'm like, wait, I don't want to start a new life that's outside of and that's just my gut, and it's probably like irrational, it's like I intellectualize things. Yeah.
When you're trying to plan for something that you don't actually know what it's going to look like, right?
Yeah,
it's so human of you, because this is what we do, to try to anticipate and plan for, and and that's great. I mean, you can have some kind of idea in your head, but you won't know until you're in it, what it's going to look like. And there's also a little bit of holding space for that uncomfortable reality too, of like, it's going to be based on who you meet. It's going to be based on, who your partner meets. There's just so many variables.
Something that I have been pretty good at recently, which I can't say I've definitely strengthened this. I don't know if it's a skill. It feels good to me, is really being present in like the day. And just like, this is working now. And I don't know if it's going to work tomorrow, but it's working now and it's okay now. And I'm just trying to live in that. Like when I get into that space where like people ask me questions, well, how's that going to work? Or, if XYZ happens, and then I try to like defend myself or like try to say, well, I'm like, wait, like I just spiraled out of something that I can't even control. I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like we might not even be here. Like why am I stressing about these potential things?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And absolutely, people will attempt to put their fear into your sphere. So what I would say is the spiritual perspective to hold is that in every moment we are choosing between fear and love. And I remember when my marriage ended, I just had sort of that recognition that I needed to make love the North Star. And if in every moment I could attempt to say, okay, all of the fears about what could conceivably come up with either of us being with a new person, all of those things are not real yet, like you're speaking to. But when those fears come up, what would love say about this, right? And I think that when we stay in the lane of love and let love sort of be what is motivating our actions as much as possible, and it's such a practice, we are often delightfully surprised by, the unspoken, unforeseen gifts that come out of that we could have never imagined. For instance, my ex's girlfriend is one of my favorite people on the planet. And is just so much more love for my child. Like she adores him, pours so much love into him. And that is just so much more love in his life. Now, the voice of fear in me, when I first met her, could have said like, new woman trying to come in and corrupt my child or whatever the thoughts might have been.
Place,
Exactly. But, that is the ego's voice. That is the voice of fear. The voice of love says, this is happening. So how do I attempt to know her? How do I attempt to see her? How do I attempt to really be present with this person as a human being versus the construct that society might put in my head about who she is? Like Vanessa just said, someone to replace me, whatever the story might be, right? But how do I continuously, as you're speaking to, in the present moment, bring myself back to the space of what would love say about this?
Yeah, I love that. And I listened to all the episodes of your podcast. So I know you talk a lot about that, and that has helped me identify that I was previously living in such a fear-based mindset and a scarcity mindset. And and you just said it's a practice, right? So when that had been my patterning for so long, I catch myself now like, oh, you're doing that thing. Like, you're not kissing her because you just want her to feel love. You're afraid it might be the last time. Like literally, like that's how I lived my life. And I'm trying to change it. And I'm, one step at a time. But yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I love that. And that brings relief to me. Just hearing you say that about your ex and his new girlfriend, and it just makes sense. It lands with me.
Yeah. I think our lives are what we decide they are, Liz. There's so many ways that we have been taught, like you were saying, of the paradigm of what a mother needs to be or what a family needs to look like. We decide what a family is. My ex is my best friend on the planet because I decided that I was going to continue to love the father of my child. And I think you guys have a good relationship, it sounds like, right? So how do I build on that? How do I say, I want my child to experience me as loving her father? That matters to me. That's important,
Yeah, I love that.
Going a little bit into this realm of, because you mentioned in your email, like this kind of, maybe this is codependency or,
yeah.
And I want to say too, that this kind of just popped in my mind. Another, I guess, reframe that my therapist gave me. I love it. It's like the conjoining of all therapists are coming into the room together. 6 degrees of therapy separation. When I was struggling, and I mean, my partner and I obviously are together with our little one, but there's still that struggle around, they don't do it the way I do. And when they're with them and not me. And so that doesn't even matter if you're actually together or not, that's still there. And I was really struggling with something, and he made a really good point around. So I was talking about my upbringing, right? And similar to yours, Liz, like really just fear-based, like that's what I brought into is my patterning. Everything is around protecting, for fear of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I mean, these are just so much of the constructs, right? That I came into a relationship with and come into parenting with. And one of the things that we were talking about was this idea of resiliency, right? Like building emotional resilience in our children. And I was really struggling around not doing things that I was raised with, or not giving her things I was raised with. And, just this kind of back and forth around what is resiliency, what is not. And he actually made a really good point, which was this. He said, you also have to think about it like this. When they are with that other person, and this could be partner, this could be grandma, this could actually be anybody, school. When they're with that other person and you're actually not with them, right? They are actually able to build a resiliency in a way that you're not aware of. So they have a need. Let's just use a really simple example because your kids too, so is mine. They tell you what they want. Usually mom speaks their language, right? Like a lot of people can't understand what she's saying half the time. I'm fluent, right? And so if I'm there and she says, Mom, I want a juice, I know exactly what she needs and I get her juice. If I'm not there and she says, we'll just say, Dad, I need a juice. And he's like, what? And she gets frustrated and pissed off and upset because he doesn't understand her. She doesn't understand him. They have this kind of emotional turmoil or conflict, right? And at some point it gets resolved in whatever way they're going to resolve it. Whether she grabs his hand and she brings him to the refrigerator and shows him, whether he gives up and walks away, whatever that is, there's actually a moment in that where there's a strengthening of resiliency for her because she's not with somebody who's going to meet her need exactly the quote unquote right way all the time. Right. And I had this real aha moment when he said that, when I was like, oh my God, you're so right. Because even in that simple little example I gave, she's learning to advocate for herself. She's learning to, demand her needs to be met. She, whatever, we could go on and on. But we don't think about those moments in that way. And so I don't know what that gives you, but for me, when he reframed that, I was like, oh shit, you're so right. And that has given me a lot of peace around those moments when I can't be there to meet all of her needs. All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love that so much. I think as mamas, we have such a strong innate desire to protect our children from anything that could possibly harm them at all costs. And what we forget sometimes is that is not always the thing that is preparing them for life.
Right.
Yeah. Like I know there are ways, like I went on my first trip away from my kiddo and I came back and he was like climbing and doing things that he didn't do with me that his dad pushed him to do because he believed in his resiliency a little bit, where sometimes I just wanted to put him in bubble wrap and keep him safe. His dad was like, no, you got this, buddy. I believe in you, which made him believe in himself and his ability to do that. And I was like, oh man, that's important too,
Right. Vanessa, I always remember the story you told on one of the episodes about, like, I don't know if this actually happened, but it was an example you gave about, like, maybe your kid has to get sunburned for the dad to learn how, like, that they need to pack sunscreen or something like that. Like, but so I think about that a lot. And my codependency, like, damn, has come a long way. Like, I mean, now I just, like, if he's not picking up and I know that they're supposed to be somewhere, I'm like, well, they'll figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, instead of like driving over there and being like, are you awake? Are you going? Are you, so
totally. And you know what? If they don't, and they don't make it there, and then
it's fine.
Then like, you know what? Let them be in their conflict together, because they got to work that shit out. And again, like, what does she get as an opportunity to learn in those moments? It's like, she gets an opportunity to advocate. She gets an opportunity to say, I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed in, I mean, obviously she's not there yet verbally, but you know what I mean? It's like that relationship between the two of them is just as much a testing ground for her as an adult as your relationship with her. And so the things that she's going to learn when she's not with you, to Danae's point, are going to be just as important than what she's going to learn when she's with you,
Right. Yeah. And something else I just wanted to like touch on is the fact that I feel like, unless I'm just looking at the wrong spaces, I feel like this is not talked about, like, ever. Like, I don't know. And I also think it's because I know a lot of moms who have primary custody of their kids. So that has also felt like I'm not a real mom, I'm a half mom, but my therapist was like, no, like, because you're not, because I know you're always thinking about her. And like,
but Liz, you are establishing, it's like Danae said earlier, like, you get to decide.
Right.
We have been living under a very specific social construct for a very long time. And we are in a new generation of, especially women, but men too, that are like, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, who wrote this rule?
Right.
And like, I mean, I'm speaking for Danae here, but you guys are basically 50-50 too. And like, it's better for them. If you guys are able to give that to them in a loving way, then why not? Who says what is quote unquote like the right way to do it?
Right.
And the reframe I just want to offer, a little bit building on what Vanessa just said, is I think that what we are seeing is a paradigm shift of men, fathers, being more involved in their children's lives. And that's a good thing. This we want to celebrate, right? Yes. And so as we celebrate that, what I would like to offer for you to hold as the reframe is, Shanicia Boswell said something that I thought was so profound and I loved it. She said, I don't call myself a single mother because I'm not a single mother. I have a child with a very involved father. What I am is a single woman with a child. And so what that means is I get to have all of these benefits of being a single woman, but with a very involved father. So you get to have a lot of opportunities as a single woman with a child that single moms don't always get to have when they don't have the support of a father like you do. So in that way, we want to celebrate your little girl's dad, because that's beautiful. That to me is expansion and growth and all of the good things we want to be becoming. You know what I mean?
Society,
yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, I know it's amazing. I know, yes, it's all the good things. So I totally am thankful for that, for her and for me too.
And like I was saying about the opposing truths, and
Yes, and yes,
and you still live in this society. We're still in a patriarchal structure. The courts still on average still outweigh the mom to the dad. Like, this is just still the construct that we're in, and we can't like deny that that's the case. That's the thing about like this idea of being a trailblazer. Like, yeah, that's great, but there's still a trail behind you that's been blazed, and that's not fun. And so it's like, we can hold all these, like, these are amazing, and also it's difficult, and they don't have to, one doesn't have to outweigh the other. One doesn't have to dismiss the other. Like, this is this act of presence, which you said you've really been working on, of like, I am sad in this moment, and I also realize that this is a good thing. I am fearful in this moment, and I also know that I want to act from love, and that's what this would look like, right? Like, we can constantly do that as a practice too, in that act of presence, which is like, I am sad and I am upset and it takes a little bit of the energy or the power out of the quote unquote negative, and by just like stating it as it is,
Yeah. And the grief thing really landed for me too, because I've always like just kind of thought it was linear, and definitely not.
Yeah.
So,
well, Liz, I feel like we could just talk to you forever, because we have the mama rep we want to get into, but will you do us a favor and write Vanessa and I and just let us know how it's going? Because I feel like in this year of 2, things are going to shift a lot, and we'd love to hear about how it's going. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was amazing.
I'm glad we were able to get on together.
Me too.
All right.
We'll speak to you
take
soon.
care. Oh my goodness. I just want to wrap my arms around that mama.
Oh, my mama bear heartstrings have been pulled.
I know. Yeah.
I think it's just really important, just to go back to what we talked about in the episode, so many processes I think that we deal with as human beings can be, and this isn't to actually minimize, but it's actually, I think, a point of clarification, can be put under the umbrella of grief. And I think that we don't recognize that enough as a society, right? It's like, we want things to make sense in a way that the process of grief does not allow for, nor should it allow for. Like, that is not what the process of grief is, right? Like, it's bigger than that sometimes, and that can be frustrating as a human on this human plane. But I do think that for a lot of us, when somebody does say to us, like, you are grieving and this is not linear, there is a moment of like, oh, I'm recapturing that moment, because for whoever's listening out there, if you're struggling with something and you're trying to make sense of something, and that feels like it lands for you, take it, because I know it's been really helpful for me.
Absolutely. I think there's, as in so many of the things we process, I think there's power in saying something out loud to sort of take away what is wrong with me, that I still feel this way around whatever the thing is. I also,
she said, by the way, like, she said that in her email around, like, I should be, I can't remember exactly how she said it, but basically, like, I should be further along, right? Like, it shouldn't hurt as much as it does. So anyway.
Yeah, it's just so much normalizing of what is challenging, and how we start to expand into the reframes that we talked about. I think it's exciting listening to someone like Liz, and just this reminder that a lot of these paradigms of what we have had in terms of the limitations of what families and family structures can look like are shifting, even like fathers being more involved in that, like, not being necessarily something we want to see as a bad thing, even though there are challenging aspects of that as a mother. There is also what is so beautiful about a child having a father who's really, really present and involved in their life,
Yeah. And like I said, trailblazers, like, that's awesome. And it's really hard to be in the forefront of a cultural shift in any way, because we don't really have people to look to, right, that have done it before us, because we're forging that new trail. And so there's a lot of us out there in a lot of different ways that I'm sure can really relate to that feeling of like, but I don't have anybody to see who's done it before me.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's right.
Thank you guys for listening. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Cheaper Than Therapy.
Be sure to share it with a friend, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you want to connect with us more, find us on Instagram at Cheaper Than Therapy, the podcast.